Greetings everyone, this is David Arhan. Today's video is going to be a very unique solution to the problem of evil. You see a lot of defenses like the free will defense. This is not going to be one of those videos that will be using those kinds of popular mainstream defenses. In fact, this unique solution to the problem of evil that exists in the Orthodox Church exists since the time of, I will say, Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. So this is going to be a more advanced, I will say, more modern explication to the solution to the problem of evil. So to kind of summarize this, it's the idea that the existence of an omnipotent and omnibenevolent being is contradictory with the existence of evil. I know evil doesn't technically exist, it's a privation of good, but bear with me here, right? Still, even if you make that kind of a defense, there's still the question of, okay, how can this still be allowed? So in other words, if God exists and evil exists in some capacity, then either God is not omnibenevolent or he is not omnipotent. Now, we need to clarify omnipotence because this is going to be a very important part of the solution. A lot of people think omnipotence just means, oh, God can do everything. He can just do anything, right? He can just do anything that we can conceive of. That's not exactly true. Omnipotence, just kind of literally means infinite potency, right? Whatever has potency can be infinitely actualized. So something that does not have any potency, or that is, in other words, something that is impossible to occur, God can't make it happen. So for example, one can conceive of God not existing, but God can't just say, okay, I'm going to stop existing and just do that, right? That's not within the definition of omnipotence. Same thing with married bachelor and one-sided paper. These things definitionally are impossible. So we need to kind of bear this in mind when we think about God's omnipotence. So when we rethink this argument in this way, so for example, if human beings are created in the image of God, then is it possible for there to be a world where evil does not come to be in some way? So if we rethink the argument in this fashion, I will argue, and this might sound shocking to some of you, I will argue it's impossible. The answer is no. If human beings are going to come into the picture, and when we speak of human beings, we're speaking of human beings that are made in the image of God, I argue that at some point evil is going to occur, right? If we have human beings existing in the way they do. And I will kind of explain why I believe that is the case. So St. Maximus, when he talks about the image of God, he says, there is a communication by grace of what are attributes naturally to God, which man also immediately received from God in the beginning when he was fashioned. So the constitution of man and his nature is based on the nature of God, in a sense, right? So when we speak about man being made in the image of God, we must think of this in this light. And one of those things is that God has free choice, God has free will. And a key note here is that free will doesn't mean being able to choose between good and evil. It means being able to choose between multiple goods. So since God has free will, man also likewise has free will and free choice. So that is the part of the image of God, right? Man's nature is made in the image of God. But then there is the likeness of God, which is something different, right? Man is originally made in the image and likeness of God. And while the image of God remains, it's kind of static because it's based on nature, the likeness of God after sin is gone. And this is because God created man in his image and likeness, and man's nature is in the image of God, but man's personhood is in the likeness of God, right? So man, by choosing to act in a specific way, right, that is following the will of God, following the commandments of God, is made like God. So what this means is that man can't be created perfectly in the likeness of God from the beginning in this sense, because human being is made perfect by acquiring the virtues of God in terms of likeness, right? That's what likeness is referring to, is becoming as virtuous and to live as God lives, live like God, to be like God, to have his being be purposed to godly living, right? By the usage of man's will and activity in line with God. So this is, again, a very key principle that we must bear in mind when we're thinking about the problem of evil, because this is relevant to kind of understanding what ethics is, especially in the ancient world, right? So virtue means excellence in Greek, and it was taught of throughout the ancient world as, perfecting a craft. So let's think of like playing the piano, right? Like, let's say you want to perfect the craft of playing the piano. You practice it over and over and over again, and each time you get better at it. The ancients taught of ethics in a very similar way, right? Like, you do it, you practice it, and you get better at it, right? You acquire some kind of wisdom in regards to it. So, you play the piano, you practice it, and over time you are excellent at playing the piano. So again, ethics is in this way. So though man is created perfectly in the image of God, man becomes perfect in the likeness of God by following the will of God, right? So there's a synergy that man has to synergize his will with God's in order to be made perfect. But of course, there's kind of a hint that you can see here. When we speak about practicing, obviously, when someone is practicing something, trying it over and over and over again, they're going to fail at some point, right? There's going to be failure that comes with it at some point. And this is the issue here, is that there's this kind of funky paradox at play. So though man is created perfectly in nature, he can become perfect only if he follows God's commandments. And then in this light, in order for man to be like God, which is the aim of human life, he must follow God's commandments. But to follow the commandments of God, so to be ethically perfect, he must be like God. So you can kind of see, okay, at one hand, okay, man is supposed to follow God, but for to be perfect, but in order for man to be perfect, he needs to follow God. In order to follow God, he needs to be perfect. That's basically the problem here at hand. So this is why I'm saying, and this is why I get to the conclusion that actually, when we, logically speak of human beings being made and created, at some point, sin and evil is going to come into the picture. Man is going to fail at following commands, and man failed at following God's first commandment. Do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because you are not experienced, you are not virtuous, you're not excellent in your ethics yet. You're not mature enough to understand, this knowledge. And until you come to this understanding, you should not eat from this tree. It's not as if the tree is evil and man should avoid it. It's for man, right? For man to be perfect, but he's just not perfect yet. He must follow God's commandments. But as you can see here, how is he going to be able to do that unless he trained this? Like, unless man is trained in this sense. So one can ask, okay, I understand what you're trying to get at, but why just create what? God, maybe God shouldn't just create man, or maybe he should create man in such a way that, man is lacking, right? Why does he not have to, but he freely chose to create man, but why did he choose to create man? What's the point? The chief purpose of God's creation is so that it can share in God's goodness and his love to other beings, right? So this is kind of one of the reasons why God is multiple persons, right? Father, Son, Holy Spirit, because God's love is eternal, and God eternally loves his Son in his Holy Spirit. So this is kind of similar logic in terms of creation. God created man because of this, right? And so this is why, evil occurs, and it's not within God's plan. This is kind of, that's the way man chooses to do things. But if evil is going to occur due to the creation of man, maybe God shouldn't have created man in the first place, right? Maybe human beings shouldn't have been made at all because of this. But to say that will basically be to say that, well, God chose to do something that is good, that chose not to do something that is good because it might have bad consequences because of sin, right? And this is kind of saying that, God was overcame because of sin. Sin basically prevented God from doing something good, right? Before even coming into the picture, which is very suspicious at best. So St. John Damascus says this in his exposition of the Orthodox faith. But if the very existence of those who through the goodness of God are in the future to exist were to be prevented by the fact that they were to become evil of their own choice, evil will have prevailed over the goodness of God. Wherefore God makes all his works good, but each becomes of its own choice good or evil. So this is also another key note, right? God has, the basic argument of problem of evil in this picture at the very least will be, God at least still knows, okay, he might not be responsible for evil coming about, but he still knows, shouldn't he prevent it? And basically what we're saying, well, if man is going to be created, there's no preventing it, basically. And man still, nevertheless, it's man's own choice that he's doing this. So the advantage of this view compared to other theodicies, the free will defense, the problem with the free will defense is, if you're going to say free will is defined by choosing between good and evil, I think that's very suspect. But also because if evil is dependent on the existence of free will, does that mean that God does not have free will? Because that's kind of what it will entail. Moreover, those who are saved, right, the saints, those are in heaven, this will mean that they also do not have free will. So even though it's a typical basic response that you see a lot of theists making as atheists, actually I think the free will defense is it has a lot of problems. And free will is a part of the defense in regards to the problem of evil, but it's not the main part of the defense, is what I will say. And how my view, or rather Irenean Theodicy, or if you want to call it that, like how the view that I am defending, how does this avoid this problem? Well, it's because, there's no evil that's going to happen in heaven. The reason why that's the case is man, when he's in heaven, becomes perfect, right? The man is already perfected in heaven, right? Because he lived, he fought against sin, he fought against evil, right? So there was this kind of test period. I'm not saying man was created to be tested. This is kind of the Muslim view that you see a lot of Muslims say, right? God created us so that we could be tested. That's why he allowed evil to come out, right? Testing is, again, it's a part of it, but it's not the main part. It's not the main reason why man was created. Man was created ultimately to participate in God's goodness and in God's life. But there is a part of the defense where, yes, there is some kind of testing, in the sense that man practices virtue, and at the end of his life, he's supposed to be virtuous, right? So that's why there's no evil in the afterlife after having gone through all of this stuff. The Mysterianism defense, right? This is basically the argument that, well, look, it's just a mystery. We just don't know, right? When you say it like that, it's not a good defense. I will say you can make a compelling case for arguing that man cannot understand why, evil exists. In the example of like a 2D object not being able to comprehend in any way a 3D object, like if you're in the two-dimensional world and someone tells you of a three-dimensional object, right? It's simultaneously a triangle and a square at the same time. Two-dimensional beings, like that doesn't make any sense. That sounds contradictory, but in the third dimension, it isn't contradictory. But it might make sense in that sense. I just don't like appealing to mystery, like generally speaking, because I think it's too lazy, first of all, and secondly, I think if you just kind of appeal to it, you got to give a really good reason, right? Like, why is this the case? Is it just something really difficult for us to understand? Like, human beings cannot conceive of it. I think mixing, the mystery aspect of it in this sense with, my argumentation, right? At least in this argument, we kind of give an explanation, but still, it might not cover the whole picture, but at least it gives kind of this explanation. So it's not as if there's no possible route that you can take. Then there's the Augustinian Theodicy, which basically says, evil is a privation of the good, right? So God didn't create evil, so God is not responsible for evil. But again, this still doesn't avoid the problem of evil, I don't think, because one can still legitimately ask, okay, sure, God is not responsible for evil to occur, but should he still prevent it if he can? That's basically the question. And if the answer is, as I provided, well, this is the reason why it can't be prevented, because man is created. This is how it logically proceeds, and there's really no other way from we can conceive of. Then at least, okay, the Augustinian Theodicy at least makes sense within this light. So this is why I think this argument, the so-called Irenean Theodicy, actually, at least the way I understand and I explain it, and I'm more than welcome if anyone sees any problems with it, if this argument doesn't really make any sense, if there's some logical holes, I'm more than welcome. But I think at the very least this argument covers a lot of the problems of these other theodicies that are quite mainstream and popular. And this is pretty much all I have to say in this video. And for that, I would like to thank all of those who have been financially supporting me, which you can become one of them if you want to enjoy some bonus content. Thank you to those on the $5 tier: Bone, Tony, Trofa, Carter, Sean, Peyton, Brian, Eddie, Maximus, Carey, Dave, Norbert. And a special big thank you to those in the Precept Gang tier, the $15 tier. Marcus Anastasius, Marcus Urch, Marco Piper, Vander Sean, Diet Soul, Let's Vlad, Nectars, which they have seen this video earlier then it has been released on YouTube. So if you want to enjoy bonuses like that, then you can go check my Patreon in the description below and become one of those patrons. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Take care, and may God be with you all. Goodbye.